Everybody, we've just had another state disaster meeting, and I just wanted to update you all. Severe tropical cyclone Narelle crossed the Queensland coast around 7 a.m. this morning, about 75 kilometres south of Lockhart River as a Category 4 system. Narelle has since moved west and is sitting around about 100 kilometres northwest of Cowan. So it crossed on the east coast between Lockhart River and Cowan, and it's threaded a needle between both. And whilst there is some damage that we've seen, and it's been some rain and some wind, that is an incredibly good news story. Incredibly good news story. I want to reiterate, the system is now moving to the western side of the Cape, and that area will experience strong winds. They're already starting to get an uptake on that, and there is some considerable rainfall that has started to fall. With that in mind, there's a flood watch that covers a significant area of the Cape, and we are seeing that as a major challenge in the hours and the days ahead. I want to turn to some reports, and I'm going to start on the east coast with Cowan. Because police were pre-positioned there, and again, I'm very grateful for all of the work of the emergency services, they've already been able to start checking on people from midday. Initial reports are that we've seen some minimal damage. There is some structural damage and there are some trees down, but overwhelmingly the damage has been relatively minimal. Helicopters are attempting to get over these areas as we seek to access roads. I'm very keen to get into Port Stewart. As you know, we evacuated that community yesterday, and whilst it is small in numbers, that is right on the coast. Still part of Cowan, but right on the coast, and we're keen to get in there to have a look at the effects there. But again, everybody was removed from there. I'm pleased to say water is back on in Cowan, although part of the town still doesn't have electricity. There is powers out at Lockhart River, but I just sent a photo only moments ago of an ergon crew there on the ground already, and whilst there's more work to go, that presence will be welcomed, I can assure you. I want to turn to the west. The system will cross the western part of the Cape later on this evening, and I just want to send a message to those communities, particularly Arakoon and Weipa, but all of those communities, that the system, the intensity will continue to pick up, as will the rainfall. So the challenges remain the same as we saw on the east coast: wind, storm surge, rain, and then flooding. But those communities are prepared, and the reports we're getting from the ground, and we just had an update from all of the councils, overwhelmingly, is that people are very well prepared for it, and that's something that we often see in the far north of the state. To damage assessments, they are underway and will be done as quickly as possible. Just a couple of notable reports. The Archer River, in a period of 6 hours, jumped from 5 metres to 13 metres. As a result, water went over a bridge, and it's a relatively new structure. And to see that quantum of water rise in such a short period of time shows you how swollen the systems already are and how much rain fell in such a short period of time. Just south of that area, we had a report of a family on a cattle station. They had to leave their residence and take shelter in a shipping container. We're told they're okay, and they've communicated with us. They are okay, but a difficult situation for them. Turning to power, there has been an amazing amount of work done today to reconnect a lot of power. Some has been disconnected to facilitate that. But Energy Queensland workers are certainly swinging into action, and we've already seen power restored to Hopevale and Napranum. We've had a briefing from Energy Queensland. In the next 24 hours, crews will be in Cowan and Lockhart River, and the aim is to reconnect those areas as quickly as possible. As I said, part of Cowan has power, but there is a part without it, so that is very important. I just want to read through the next bit, which is roads. This is something that's going to be a challenge for some time, but the Peninsula Development Road is closed between Laura and Cowan and Weipa. Road access between Cairns and Cooktown to the Cape communities of Cowan, Pomperow, Lockhart River, Arakoon, Weipa, Napranum, Mapoon and Northern Peninsula area remains impacted by flooding. The Burke Developmental Road is closed between Normanton and Chillago in multiple locations. and that restricts road access to Kawanyama, as locals know. The Mulligan Highway is closed at the McLeod River due to flooding preventing road access from Cairns to Lakeland, Cooktown and Cowan. Little Annan River is rising, but it's likely to close most likely today. But if people can stay on the disaster.qld.gov.au website for updates. Just while I'm talking about roads, I do want to mention, as I did earlier today, the situation in the southwest of the state. We still have communities that are isolated, and in the case of communities like Junda, the water still hasn't reached its peak. And this is from an event that started 3 weeks ago. And we're very mindful about the impacts and challenges there, and we haven't forgotten about the need to continue to make sure that wherever the moment access is, the moment water falls, we'll be in there doing road repairs. I can assure you to reconnect those communities as well. Back on this event, aviation. Cairns to Weipa and Cairns to Horn Island scheduled services have been cancelled. Cairns to Bamaga, a decision on tomorrow's service is expected this afternoon. A decision on Sunday flights, Cairns to Bamaga, Cairns to Lockhart River and Arakoon is expected on Saturday morning, and we'll make sure that's communicated. Scheduled services to Bamaga, Lockhart River, Cowan, Pomperau and Cooktown have been cancelled. The Cairns to Kawanyama scheduled service is being reviewed. To ports, closed, Weipa, Amram and Scarden River ports, and the only movements there are the emergency, those of emergency nature. But reopened, Port Douglas, Port of Cooktown and Cape Flattery. They are reopened, and that's some really good work. Just on, you would have seen some of the scenes in the northern beaches of Cairns. There's some significant erosion there, and that happened in the early hours, late last night and in the early hours of this morning. The head of the Reconstruction Authority, Jake Albert, is actually on the ground, and he's already begun liaising with councils. But there's some impacts to infrastructure there, and you would have seen some of the images of huts and the footpath there, and there has been some damage in the northern beaches of Cairns. So before I hand over to Matt for briefing exactly where the system is, just a few final messages from me. While we've threaded the needle on the east coast, we continue to remain vigilant about the impacts on the west, and we are determined to make sure that we get through the event in the way that we have so far. We have pre-positioned assets right across the area. We have pre-positioned people right across the area. And combined with the fact that these residents have overwhelmingly done an amazing job in spreading the message and preparing, we have every faith in things going well. I do want to make this point, and it's an important one. I said there'd be no daylight between response and recovery. Well, the response hasn't even started on the west coast, and we are already in recovery mode on the east coast. And that shows you how serious we are about making sure there's no daylight, and how serious we are about having those people there on the ground to deliver what is needed. Finally, tomorrow morning I'll be chairing the state disaster meeting from Cooktown, and I'll spend some time going throughout those communities. And I just wanted to make the observation. I had a call from the Prime Minister this morning passing on his best wishes, and I think that's something I want to acknowledge and say thank you to, as it is the presence of the Federal Minister and all of the councils who have been part of those meetings the whole way through. We promised people we'd be on the ground. We promised people we'd see this through. We promised there'd be no daylight between response and recovery, and that is exactly what people are going to see. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Premier. So an afternoon update for severe tropical cyclone Narelle. As the Premier mentioned, across the far north Queensland coast around 7 a.m. this morning, the eye of the system moving east-northeast of Cowan as a Category 4 system, with wind gusts in excess of 250 kilometres per hour near the core. At 10 a.m. this morning, the system had weakened to a Category 3, and it moved about 50 kilometres to the north of Cowan. Currently, the system is continuing to weaken and is around 100 kilometres to the northwest of Cowan, and is expected to track between Arakoon and Weipa off the coast, the west coast, this evening as a Category 2 system. So the tropical cyclone warning zone extends across Cape York Peninsula, continuing between Lockhart River and Cape Melville on the east coast, and between Mapoon and Pomperau on the west coast. And that still includes Cowan, Weipa and Arakoon. But those warning areas will continue to contract west as the system heads away into the Gulf of Carpentaria. In terms of impacts we have recorded already, Lockhart River recorded a wind gust to 115 kilometres per hour, so that's just below that, sort of well into the damaging and just below that destructive wind gust threshold. Weipa, when I looked just a few minutes ago, was gusting up around 80 kilometres per hour from the west, and those winds are increasing in that part of the Cape. So destructive wind gusts are still possible near the core of this system as it tracks across the Cape as a Category 2. Those wind gusts could reach 160 kilometres per hour, and again, Weipa and Aurukun are the most concerning for that late this afternoon and into the early hours of this evening. Damaging wind gusts to 120 kilometres per hour are still possible across the tropical cyclone warning area. The next impact I'd like to talk about is that heavy to intense rainfall. So we've seen 360 millimetres recorded in the last 24 hours at Wenlock River, just to the south of Lockhart, and 348 millimetres at Pasco River. And the Premier mentioned those extreme river rises in very short time resulting from that very heavy rainfall. We've also seen nearly 200 millimetres at Sherga Raft Base near Weipa and 155 millimetres at Lockhart. Further down the east coast at Daintree and Tully, up around 150 millimetres, and also up around 100 millimetres near Cairns. Thinking of rainfall over the next 24 to 48 hours, and at this stage it is the next 24 hours that we're still concerned about. We're likely to see more falls in excess of 200 millimetres, stretching up the Cape from Ingham north. And those falls may increase to 500 millimetres close to the system as it tracks off the west coast. The tropical cyclone has obviously moved off the east coast now, and we are seeing it then track off the western side of the peninsula. As it does so, there is the potential for a storm surge on the west coast, and we're particularly concerned about those low-lying areas around Weipa down to Kawanyama. So the large waves and those strong westerlies on the sort of northern side of the cyclone as it moves across the coast, as well as the potential for a storm surge. So in summary, we're still dealing with a Category 3 system. It is decaying to a Category 2 system and moving off the coast between Aurukun and Weipa around sunset or into this evening. Although the tropical cyclone has weakened, there is still the potential for destructive winds for those communities that I've mentioned. And across the warning area, we're still concerned about those wind gusts possible to 120 kilometres per hour. Heavy to intense rainfall is still occurring, and even after the system moves off the west coast, there is the potential for heavy rain, and the water that has fallen will then flow into those rivers and creeks, and the potential for flash and riverine flooding continues. There are flood watches and flood warnings current across those Cape rivers. As the tropical cyclone continues to track west, the warnings will be updated, so please stay up to date with those latest on the Bureau's app and the Bureau's website, because the warnings will contract west, and those communities that are on the east coast are obviously lessening their risk profile at this stage. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Chris Stream, State Disaster Coordinator. So we, and as has been briefed by the Premier and Matt from the Bureau, we are not out of the danger zone yet. We still have a number of risks, down power lines and utility damage as well, although we have a series of crews out attending to that now. Obviously on the western area of the coast, our emergency service crews are still sheltering in place as we speak and as that cyclone continues its westward movement. But even in those areas where the greater threat of wind and heavy rainfall has passed, we are still seeing flooded. So as Matt briefed, some of those areas have seen over 300 mil, and we are still seeing significant flooding. Since the start of the season, swiftwater rescue crews and the QPS, and in some cases members of the community, have carried out over 90 rescues from people driving into floodwaters. And in one tragic case recently, we saw the death of 2 people that drove into those floodwaters. So absolute tragic set of circumstances and absolutely avoidable. Do not let stupidity shorten your life. Driving into floodwaters can have fatal consequences and can place emergency service responders and others at risk when they have to rescue, if they can rescue you. And as I said, along the west coast now, it is too dangerous still for emergency service crews to respond. So that is a clear part of my messaging. Again, crews are starting to get out there on the east coast. We're starting to have those helicopter patrols get up into the air, but in some cases some of those responses will continue through the night and into tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Over to you guys. Thanks.
In terms of the East Coast of the Cape, is this the best possible scenario that could happen in terms of tracking?
Yeah, for a system of that magnitude to go right between the two larger populated centres of Lockhart River and Cowan, that was an incredibly good result. That is a really good news story, and we should celebrate that.
Have there been any injuries at all?
No.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, it really is. We're dealing with a really big system. Whilst it was narrower, it was a really big system, and for it to thread the needle between two populated centres like that is a really good news story. There's still challenges with flooding, and that's something that has to be clearly said. There's always the risk with swollen catchments at the best of times, let alone with the amount of rain that's falling, but overwhelmingly, that was a really good outcome.
Given all that, Vital Queensland has the best it possibly can
Yeah.
out of this system as of right now.
Yeah, that's right, and it's a good caveat because there still is the prospect of a Category 3 into a Category 2 system crossing the west coast, and if that is over a populated centre, there'll be challenges there, and there's obviously the rainfall, and we're seeing how much that is moving catchments that are already full. I made the point earlier, and I'll make it again. The people in this part of the world, they know those low creeks and rivers. They know that. They know it overwhelmingly. It's just important for us to say that there is still a lot of rain in the system, and that can provide some challenges. But overwhelmingly, the way that communities have responded and the pre-positioning of so many different crews has really put it in a good stead.
In terms of the impact of roads that you talked about,
Yeah.
are you expecting a fairly hefty price tag to get impact on the centre?
Yeah, time will tell. There'll be damage and there will be expenses, but there'll also be isolation and a lengthy period of it. You would have seen the photo of on the developmental road, the Cowan, the crossing at Cowan is metres underneath. In the case of at the Archer, 5 to 13 metres in a handful of hours. That's incredible, and that means there's an incredible velocity as well. So we'll have a look and monitor that when it's safe to do so as well. So yeah, there'll be damage, but overwhelmingly in a disaster, you park the cost a distant second to people, and the fact that everybody's come through this at this point is the real good news story in all of this, and that's why it's so important now that people just focus on flooding. They know the areas, they overwhelmingly will respond well, and that's a successful outcome if that's the case.
One of the bomb radars up there did go down when the system did cross.
Yeah.
Have you got any updates when that might be online again?
Look, I'm told it's an issue with power, but Matt might be able to do that. But I guess I can make some comments about a resourcing point of view, and every time I speak about this, I always go at pains to say this isn't an issue with the men and women who work for the BOM, and this is my criticism, and it's been a long-term criticism of the resourcing of the Bureau of Meteorology. And for those of you who have seen me talking about this, it has transitioned through a lot of different governments in Canberra from many different political persuasions over a really long period of time. There just is not sufficient gauges and wind radars in what is a large part of the state. And we're seeing that. We are seeing it time and time again. And whether that's our friends in the northwest and the southwest of the state who are trying to determine how high water will rise and how quickly with limited gauges, whether that's people in this situation who don't know about wind speeds and would love nothing more than to have radars from multiple different angles determining how big a system is and where it's going. A lack of investment in those resources is challenging, and I won't take a backward step on that. I think an investment in that will save lives, and I'll continue to advocate for it.
Premier, we've seen your government respond from previous disasters, bringing in heavier penalties for copper thieves during disaster. We've heard about all the people driving into floodwaters.
Yeah.
Will the government be open to new or increased penalties who are risking first responders?
Alex, we haven't turned our attention to it, but I think Chris mounted a really good case for how impactful it is. What I always do is I actually ask people to see it not through their eyes, but through the eyes of the people who have to come to their rescue. And some of the images that we've seen in the last few months, just if you don't do it for yourself, Do it for someone who else has got a family, who has no connection with you, but is risking their life so that you can go home to your family. And I'd like to appeal to people's goodwill and intelligence, and I think the vast majority of people do respond to that. And the instances, for every idiot who goes in, there's many thousands who don't. So we haven't turned our attention to it, but I'll keep explaining to people why it's the right thing to do, not just for them, but for others.
I mean, just for Arakoon and for Weaver
Yeah.
now, what are things looking like there, and what do you want those residents to be aware of as that cyclone?
Yeah, we want them to stay put for now. They've got their plan in place and they should stay. We don't know where that system will cross, and whilst it's smaller than the system that crossed the East Coast, if you get a Category 3 or a 2 system go straight over the top, that'll still provide some really big challenges in the short term with wind, and the amount of rain that is in the system will provide challenges there regardless where it crosses. So we're just asking people to stay put and continue to take the advice. It's still some time before that system will cross the West Coast, somewhere into tonight.
Experts have said the storm was made worse because of global heating with super hot surface temperatures of the ocean. What do you make of that?
I make of it that I have to deal with the challenges that are presented to us, and I'll always do that. And I'm mindful that we have been burdened with a lot of these in a short period of time, and as a result, we have to respond accordingly. Yeah.
I know we focused on this system, but you did mention yesterday there is another system out to sea. Have you got an update on that?
Sure. So the latest guidance on that has the potential for a system to form in the Coral Sea from about Tuesday, Wednesday onwards. It is around about a 10 or 15% chance of forming into a tropical cyclone. The model guidance still has a large spread on where that system moves, but it is starting to firm up with a southward or southeastward movement, so forming in the Coral Sea and then tracking away. But at this range, we're talking 5, 6, 7 more days away, that sort of information needs to be updated regularly, and that guidance does change.
Just on the track map for those communities like Arakoon, where does it look like the current system is going to? Is it both of those communities, or is it looking like it's going to go to those communities?
No, it goes just north of Arakoon at this point. Right? So the system did drift a little bit further north, and we talked about it moving north of Cowan. So it drifted a little bit north, and that changed the track just slightly north of Arakoon, between Arakoon and Weipa. It does look like it's only 10 or 20 kilometres north of Arakoon at this stage, but those forecasts will be updated as we move into this evening.
Wind gusts 115 k's an hour, you mentioned at Lockhart River. Is that the highest recorded?
It is the highest recorded, and it was well removed from the core of the system. Right? So that, I'll be very interested to see the damage reports and the aerial photographs afterwards, because that swathe that stretches between Cowan and Lockhart River, I would almost certainly think there'll be some extreme damage through that area, particularly near the east coast.
What about the Northern Territory? Obviously, it's going to go to London and the Northern Territory. Where it's going to hit, is it sort of guaranteed that it's going to hit in that track map where it is now, or can you move away from that?
Guaranteed no, because you will always update those track maps as the system crosses. But moving across the Gulf overnight Friday into Saturday, and then potentially affecting Groot Island, and then across the top end towards Catherine, which is concerning in terms of rainfall there as well. But at this stage, there is a tropical cyclone watch that extends all the way along the east coast of the top end.
Last two guys will get going on the next one. The other system that you mentioned, appreciate it's a few days out,
Sure.
and a lot could change, but are you planning, is it looking like crossing or hugging the coast and coming south?
It looks like it will move south and stay over water, so stay out to sea. But like I said, that is, at this range, I wouldn't be putting too much credit in exact movement.
Thank you, everybody.